Hello watch enthusiasts. Now those who've been watching my channel for a while will know that I have a great admiration for military watches and indeed the manufacturers who are able to produce these splendid timepieces for indeed those who are in far more testing circumstances than, for example, I am. And one of the brands which rises to the top of this list is Marathon. And Marathon have become known for their dive watches, for their field watches, and their aviation watches in the way of, for example, the Navigator in that field. But I think the bread and butter of their collection is their General Purpose Quartz line. And the General Purpose line is designed to be a simple field watch line of watches built to last, and they come in both quartz and mechanical versions. But in 2018 they updated their range with models which no longer feature entirely fibre shell constructions, but now have steel elements in carefully chosen places to provide you with a watch which is both extremely robust, but also very, very long lasting. And so, as a result, I've been extremely kindly sent this watch by Page & Cooper. And I don't mean this video as some sort of advertised video, but in truth, I have developed a great deal of trust for Page & Cooper, who are the registered service centre for Sinn, and indeed are the sellers of various other rather unique brands in the UK, such as Damasco, and indeed Dudan, which they're picking up this year, who are a brand who I have the greatest admiration for, making pilots' watches for the French Air Force. And they were very kind to send me this timepiece to review, because as I've said, it is new for 2018. And as you can see, it comes in this cardboard casing, which is a small and practical box, and as you can see, this is produced directly for military specifications, as each version has been commissioned for that purpose, with cage numbers and military stock numbers being the only real advertising on this timepiece, and its casing. And the reason for this very simple packaging is just for shipping, because of course these are going to be shipped to difficult locations to access, as they are designed for the military. And so as a result, for ease of movement and also for lightness, these cases are the best option. And as you can see, the cardboard box simply opens like so, to reveal both a leaflet which provides the specifications of the watch and the instructions, which I will talk about later on in the video, because those are of course a crucial aspect of this piece. But inside the box we see the watch, which is simply placed inside this branded bag, and which provides you with a view of this remarkable timepiece for the value it offers, and for a watch which is different to anything else I've found on the market. And this is the watch outside the case. And as you can see, it's immediately a highly military watch, with this highly legible dial with military time as well as the 12-hour time, as well as the fact that it has this rather unique style of case, which I haven't seen this construction from other manufacturers before. And this is a watch which is immediately designed to be a field watch. And the field watch has to be legible, it has to be practical, it has to be light, but it also has to be resistant. And this watch fulfills all of those criteria with flying colours. The sizing of this watch is misleading, because I'd like to start with that to make this quite clear. Because the watch is 34mm in diameter, and 39 to 39.5mm from lug to lug, depending on how you measure it. And this immediately appears rather small, but I'll show you when I show you later on the wrist, this doesn't make too much difference to the owner, and in many ways makes the watch only more comfortable and wearable. And one has to remember these watches are designed to not get in the way, and that's something this watch manages to do extremely well. The watch is also only 11mm thick, which means that it actually doesn't cause any trouble with cuffs if you do choose to wear it with them. But then, of course, the most crucial part of this case is the fibre shell construction. And the fibre shell construction has been present in these general purpose military watches for a while now, but only this year have they amalgamated that with the concept of stainless steel in the crown and the bezel, but I'll talk about those in more detail later on. And this fibre shell case offers a build which is both less expensive than a full stainless steel case, but also offers very different characteristics. So for example, it doesn't dent like stainless steel would, which is something which I think one can appreciate. Also, the watch can be recased, as opposed to the stainless steel ones, where that would be a more lengthy process. Here you can have the cases replaced if they are damaged, which of course they will probably be during military action. And of course these watches are military timepieces, so they are built for those specifications and for these aims, but of course us civilians can enjoy these as well. And the build of the watch also features fixed lugs. And fixed lugs, or lug bars rather, are something which have been seen on military watches really forever. However, they became more and more popular in the 60s and 70s when watches with conventional lugs started having them as a sort of a set constant. And so these provide a more resistant hold on the strap than a spring bar would, though at the compromise of not being able to wear a conventional two-piece strap. That said, though, I wouldn't say that's a problem with this watch, as really you're going to be wearing it on one of these styles of single-piece straps. And the build of the watch is extremely nicely done. It's this matted finish where there aren't any seams visible in the fibre shell, which is appreciated when one often would worry that with a construction of this type. Then you have the front of the watch, where previously a sapphire crystal wouldn't have been present, but now one has been added to this timepiece to add a greater scratch resistance. And they have even considered the fact that sapphire is more brittle than plexiglass, for example, by adding this steel bezel, which is bead blasted to be matted so as not to reflect anything in combat. Now, what I would like to make very clear at this stage is the pricing of this watch, which I think is remarkable, bearing in mind what they're able to offer, because this puts everything else about the watch into brilliant context. And this watch comes in at two pricings, for this version with tritium, which I'll talk about later, because the version with Mariglow, which is their style of Luminova, is £135. This model moves up to £165 for the no-date version, or for this particular model with the date, £170. And inside this watch, it's very much able to live up to this pricing, because internally this watch features, though one can't see it, an ETA FO6 movement. And the FO6 is an industry standard for high-quality movements from Switzerland. And these watches are made in Chaux de Fonds in Switzerland, which is great to see, especially at this price range. And unlike the sort of cheap movements one often sees in a lot of fashion watches, which cost very, very little money and don't offer a great deal in terms of accuracy or resistance, the FO6 is a fully metal construction, so it has a fully metal build, which is great to see and provides you with a greater durability and life for this movement, but also features something which is a real product of high-end engineering of the 1970s. And what this is the idea of an end-of-life indicator. And the end-of-life indicator, as I've said, was a product of very high-end dive watches, in fact, from Seiko, for example, in the 1970s, where these technical applications needed the ability to be able to tell when the watch's battery was running low. And so as a result, on this movement, which is albeit a lot more affordable than those movements in the past, allows you to see when the battery is low by ticking in rather than 1 second increments, in 4 second increments. So you can very, very clearly see that the watch is running low, and you can send it back to Marathon to be sorted out. And that is an area where they've really put a lot of care to give you a movement which is durable, and more durable, I must admit, than, for example, a mechanical movement would be in these watches, which is exactly in the interest of this timepiece. And of course, the watch's operation is performed entirely through the stainless steel crown, which is bead blasted in order to give you a greater life. Because, of course, a fibre shell style of crown would wear away or be damaged more easily. And this one is, thanks to a notch placed in the back of the crown, very easily pulled out to its first position, as you can see, to adjust the date, or the second position to stop the seconds in order to synchronise the watches, and then in order to adjust the hands for whatever timing you might want to give it. And I'll just move it aside there to be able to show you another interesting mark on this watch. And the dial of this watch is something which has become something seen across the entire Marathon range, and has become really very very telling of this particular brand. And Marathon are a brand who produce watches really exclusively for the military. It's a brilliant thing that we as civilians are able to buy these, but as you can see from the US government markings on the dial, these watches do fulfill that single purpose. And this is seen in the way the dial is printed. And the dial is finished in this matte black, which is probably difficult to see for you with the reflections due to my light. Though, as you can see, its reflectivity is very minimal, thanks to the sapphire crystal being nicely treated to allow you to read it from any angle. But I must admit, thanks to the lighting, the black does appear muted. If I just turn it like this, you can see immediately it's a deep matte black, which is exactly what you would want. And again, reflections are frowned upon on military watches, simply because they would give away your position or simply dazzle you when you look at the watch. So all the elements on this watch are matted from the sides of the case, as you can see, which are very, very nicely finished in this matte finish, all the way to that bezel, which again features the same matted edge, which works very, very nicely. And the dial follows that same idea of being highly legible and with no particular ornamentation. And on the dial you can see the 12-hour time printed in these very legible and clear numerals around the full run of the dial, with the date moved to 4:30 so it doesn't obstruct any of the writing. And then, of course, it has Swiss made at the bottom of the dial to show you a certain origin of this timepiece. And then we have this second hand, which has an arrow and a dot on the end, and allows you to very clearly pick out the time when looking at it. Then, of course, one has the military time. And the military time is seen along that internal run on the dial from 24 to 13, around that circle. And that's, of course, so you can use military and more simply European time for, saying, 1800 hours, rather than 6 o'clock in the evening. And this is something which isn't necessarily required, but which I think goes to make this watch all the more interesting. And what I was most interested by with this watch was the fact that it doesn't appear cluttered on the dial. I expected the dial to appear very busy, but in this case actually it appears very clean and without any particular markings, which would be a problem, which I appreciate with simply having Marathon there as their mark. And of course one also has tritium. And Marathon do also, as I've said, make Mariglow, which is their luminova style of option, which means that glows as a result of external light being reused by the markers on the dial. And these markers are larger and will potentially glow brighter when they're first used, but will wear off within 8 hours of use. This, on the other hand, is tritium. And tritium has been used since radium stopped being used in the middle of the 20th century, because radium has had genuine medical consequences due to its high radioactivity. However, tritium, which is hydrogen-3, which is an isotope of hydrogen, allows these small amounts of gas, which is sometimes used in paint in the past, but much more effectively has been used by Marathon here in tubes. And as you can see, they have marked this on the dial with H3 and then a radioactive symbol to show this. But this is a beta particle emitter, and the amount of radiation emitted really isn't enough to go through the human skin. So there's no concern there with regards to it causing you any harm. There really is nothing to worry about. And of course, these are marked by these small tubes, and they're glass tubes which contain the gas. And as it emits beta particles, these react with a painted base, which glows. And this allows the watch to have a half-life of about 12.5 years, but it will be highly legible in the dark for 25 years. And what this means is that you never have to actually expose this watch to light. This could be used in caves for the entirety of its ownership, and yet would still be legible after 25 years, which is brilliant to have. And I'm a real lover of these tritium dials, because they do offer you something which luminova simply can't. And luminova is great, but it can't compete with this in terms of sheer practicality. And one interesting detail is that the 12 o'clock pip, as you can see, is a different colour. Whilst the others glow a greeny yellow, that glows an orange, which means that you can very quickly tell which way up the watch is, which is something different that I haven't seen elsewhere. I've now taken the watch off the strap to show you the details of this case. And as you can see, the case is this sage colour, and is available in a sort of a desert colour as well, to provide a different colour, amongst others. Then one also has these fixed bars, which I've mentioned, but as you can see very clearly here, provide you with a very sturdy attachment for the strap. And if you really did want to use this watch with a two-piece strap, I suppose you could, because several brands such as Coloreb do produce straps which wrap around and then can be pinned. Well, that's really down to the owner to decide. And the case back is stainless steel, which is something I appreciate, because it'll be against the skin, and steel is always a good material for that. And it has the various details of this watch, which is rather interesting, because it shows the radiation that this watch emits, which is 25 millicuries, after, of course, Marie Curie, the very famous scientist associated with radiation. And, of course, one has the various details, the Marathon website, and the designations of the watch. And then one has this covering for the battery and this rubber. Now, the design of the watch is built around the width of the strap, and the strap itself is 16 millimeters across. And this, to many, will seem rather narrow, but works very nicely with this watch to give you both a secure fit, but also one which won't get in the way of other things you might have on your wrist. And it does come with a matching strap. Marathon produce a range of these straps in the different colours of the cases to match. And these are very simple single pass-through straps, which I must say I prefer to NATO straps, as some people who've seen the watches I wear, I have actually removed the bottom loop on a lot of my NATO straps to wear them like this, because it gives you a slimmer fit. And, of course, it does mean that if you hang the watch up, there's slightly more risk of the watch sliding off the strap, but if there's such a tight fit on this watch, that wouldn't be a problem in this particular instance. Then, of course, the single keeper this watch has is a woven one, like this, which means it won't catch on anything, but provides a comfortable fit without any of the seams that you would normally have underneath the strap, where a normal NATO strap might have seams where they'd sewn the strap together. There is a stainless steel buckle, and as you can see, which is PVD coated to be black, which is again in keeping with the idea this watch has to be somewhat stealthy and shouldn't give off reflections. On the wrist, this watch provides a wear which is extremely good, bearing in mind the 34mm diameter and the 39mm lug-to-lug length. And the watch, as you can see, fits on my 6.7-inch wrist very, very well. And my wrist size does vary from just under that size to just over that size at the different times of year, but this is a very standard size for a wrist to be. And I've found this watch wears very well on wrists over the 7-inch size, or even into the 7.5 or 8-inch size, or even down into the 6-inch sizes. So there really isn't a problem with this watch being of this size. And the reason for that, I think, is because the strap, due to the fact that it has to pass over the bar, as you can see, actually lifts up quite nicely. It means it's moved away from the wrist to then come back down to meet it. And this means that it's very soft and comfortable on the wrist, with the watch sinking into the surface of the wrist, as you can see very, very well, which reduces the 11mm thickness down to about 9mm realistically of protrusion from the wrist. As you can see, the crown also doesn't impede my movement at all, thanks to the fact that it's actually inset in the case rather nicely, rather than being placed rather far out. And this means the watch does wear very comfortably with very little trouble. And I tried wearing the watch on the opposite wrist to use as sort of a secondary watch, and I didn't have any problems with doing that either, although it is always bizarre putting a watch on the wrist you're not used to wearing one on. But the strap, as you can see, doesn't provide any trouble and is very comfortable due to the fact that it's rather a soft nylon material. And then, of course, the legibility is excellent, with the watch not appearing too small, as you can see, and actually appearing rather masculine in its design, despite being of this size. And so I'll show you the luminescence of this watch, because I feel that this watch, if anything, is proven by that legibility at all times of day. Now, here's the watch in the dark. And as you can see, the decay of this isotope means that you get this very, very interesting and highly legible display. The second hand isn't lumed, which is something which some people have asked about, but I don't think this poses too much of a trouble. The hands are also highly legible, and as you can see, that pip at 12 o'clock is orange rather than the yellowy green otherwise, which gives you a very clear display of the watch in really any lighting sort of situation. And this glow will continue for about 25 years before it becomes too faint to be of any use, which is interesting and I think rather useful. And one thing to note is that, as you can see, the glow of it is very different to superluminova. It doesn't have that crisp brightness that has, but rather in its place has this soft style of display, which is in my eyes just as good, but is something to get used to. And the fact is, the reason for this, as far as I can figure out from what's been said, is because isotopes don't decay in a constant sort of rate, so you get this difference in coloration and fluctuation in brightness, which means that you get this fuzziness to its look. That said, though, when you look at it with the human eye, there isn't really that much fuzziness, and actually it looks very bright and clear. It's simply in the video that you get this sort of appearance. Now, I'll conclude this video here, but I would like to know in the comments down below what you think of this timepiece, and indeed whether you think it's an interesting option as far as field watches go, in a market where a lot of people buy field watches as simply versatile dress watches. Because I do think this offers something far, far more robust and more specific than something like a Hamilton car key, which, though perhaps more ornate than this watch, doesn't offer the bare functionality and the robust nature of this timepiece, which is cleared through its military credentials, and its history really, as far as being manufactured by the brand Marathon, with this functionality at a frankly remarkable price tag. And so if you enjoyed the video, then please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel and to be able to enjoy more content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.